I think Ethereum has sort of like this very ideological element to it, right?
One thing that everyone loves about Ethereum is the philosophical stance, and the right way to operate a crypto protocol is like a Web2 startup. You want to wait as long as possible.
I think for better or for worse, that has played out the wrong way. Vibes are definitely at an all-time low. I think
Is it up to the L2s to push the limits of what users want?
It's kind of a different question from like what do users want, what do financial interests want. It's kind of like, is Ethereum just there to like exist in a state of philosophical perfection?
it feels like it's optimizing for like a edge case, which may or may not happen. And I feel like
Gents, how are we doing?
very good. Thanks for having us on. How are you, dude?
Yeah, good. Crazy times. Do not open deck screener. We're recording this on, well, it's 24th of January for me, this side of the world in the morning. But yeah, I think people are losing the plot a little bit.
Yeah, everyone seems a bit bearish given Bitcoin's still trading above 100K. Everyone's making it feel like the end of the world right now, to be honest.
Yeah, and everyone's fighting as well. Ethereum infighting at the Ethereum, I suppose not the foundation, but people are pushing back on the foundation. Solana and Ethereum are fighting. Everyone's kind of throwing their toys out the pram. Yeah, what you kind of making of that? Because you guys, I suppose, I put it in the show notes that it must feel like mom and dad are fighting a little bit with Solana and Ethereum, going head to head a lot, and you guys sit in the middle like a perfect little juncture.
Yeah, Terry, you can't hear you. I can't hear you. But yeah, I'll kick off. Well, first of all, someone needs to tell Vitalik that putting my lady and Remilio in every tweet is not gonna help the vibes and save Ethereum for starters. Um, I mean, beyond that, I think Ethereum has sort of like this very ideological element to it, right? This whole kind of like credibly neutral party, they don't really like interject or do like hidden hand stuff behind the scenes. I think for better or for worse, that has played out the wrong way because most people have seen them as too passive. They feel like maybe like a bureaucratic organization. They're just not moving fast enough. And Solana is steadily coming to beat Ethereum on basically all metrics. Active wallets, DEX volume, economic like activity, or like REV. Ethereum is just losing. And I think like a lot of people who have made a conscious decision, whether like as infra and Avid or like they are scared of like losing too, because if Ethereum as a whole kind of loses, then like they kind of lose simultaneously. So vibes are definitely at an all-time low. I think Ethereum versus Solana, like sure, there's some infighting between the two parties, but like it's not as bad as like just a general like it's over vibes for Ethereum right now. I don't know. I saw this message in this Telegram group chat I was in, and I was like, if you bought Ethereum at April 2021, you would be up like 0.7% right now. And I was like, that's insane. Right. But like between Solana and Ethereum, I think Eclipse does stand at a very interesting like ideological point. We've shown that the SVM is like probably the execution environment for this cycle. And Eclipse has also shown that we can meaningfully scale Ethereum using the SVM. It's not just like some hand wavy like, oh, we're gonna like scale Ethereum. Eclipse has hit like a peak TPS of 8,600. We've shown that we can significantly deliver the performance and scale that Ethereum needs today. And I think even like the anime coin today, on the claim on Arbitrum today is just like further evidence of that. I don't know whether Terry has any more thoughts on the whole Ethereum Foundation, Solana versus Ethereum.
I was going to say, one thing that everyone loves about Ethereum is the philosophical stance, and kind of the background that Ethereum has in the cypherpunk, solar punk, insert something punk community. And what makes me really sad is if Ethereum gives up this ethos, we're kind of saying the right way to operate a crypto protocol is like a Web2 startup, where instead of decentralizing, on the onset or rather quickly, you want to wait as long as possible. And if you take that to the limits, if you take that ethos to the limits, like where is the limit? Right? Is it that you should never decentralize? Because I think one interesting thing we've seen is in studying the governance mechanism of different L2s, we've definitely noticed like those that decentralized too quickly and gave governance rights to token holders especially, they went and underwent some type of like governance capture where there were token interests that were on to, plunder the treasury and direct treasury spending to things that were beneficial to their pockets. I think, in my opinion, at the expense of the actual protocol and its long-term growth. So it's kind of like, I guess it's kind of like an age-old, 3 millennia question of like, okay, do you do a democracy where you give people the ability to actually control their own fate, but devolve into some form of populism? Or do you try to have some type of enlightened dictatorship for as long as possible, but then, that ends up becoming a tyranny? But anyway, another thing I want to mention is maybe there is a world where the product that Ethereum sells is primarily the philosophy, and the chain is one that continues to embody this philosophy, right? And there is a separation of concerns between the financial aspect of the token itself, which is the price of ETH, and actually the product that Ethereum sells, which is, a chain that conforms to these like ideals that it has set out. And maybe that's okay. Like maybe it's not that Ethereum and Ethereum Foundation and their job is to actually maximize token holder value, but it is actually just to uphold the characteristics of the chain, by the chain that they invented, right?
So going along and playing that thought out, is it up to the L2s to push the limits of what users want, as opposed to the base layer kind of like going down that pursuit?
I mean, it's kind of a different question from like what do users want, what do financial interests want. It's kind of like is there a product, does the EF serve the interests of the token holders and the users, or is EF just there and Ethereum just there to like exist in a state of philosophical perfection? I mean, that sounds crazy, and like, if Solana people hear this, they're going to be like, wow, this is why ETH loses. But like precisely the definition of losing might be that you don't need the users, you don't need all the liquidity, you don't need all the like the price and the market cap. It's just that if you are able to bring something like this into the world, that it is of itself is sufficient for you to have said that Ethereum was successful. And Ren is about to just like burst into laughter. Anyway, so I mean, the job of the L2 here then should be, if you're aligned with the ethos, if you're aligned with this philosophy, but you still want to scale Ethereum while inheriting its security properties, its decentralization, then yeah, the job is of the L2. I'm not saying that the L1 should ossify, but like, what path does the EF have forward here, right? Like, if you increase block gas limits by 2x, and then if you decrease block times by half, and then you have single slot finality, you are still probably 2 orders of magnitude slower than Solana, right? So it's like, if you try to compete in their axes, you will never win, right? Because like the Ethereum community is never going to be like, okay, you know what? If you want to run an ETH full node, you got to get into a data center. Like that is just completely giving up. So then what path is there forward?
Do you want to expand on any of that, Ren? Were you about to burst into laughter, or?
I was like, yeah, I don't know what Terry's talking about. I've always been sort of like a partial, like this whole like anyone should be able to run an ETH node in their basement hater. It feels like it's optimizing for like a very out there like edge case, which may or may not happen. And I feel like the Ethereum Foundation or like ETH leaders, so to say, could have been a bit more like aggressive on their roadmap, right? Like surely not just like say, okay, I'm gonna have like 512 GB RAM requirements overnight and like God knows how much, but like it feels like there were definitely conscious design decisions that they could have made along the way to scale the L1 faster and not entirely build up to the L2s, which also haven't significantly scaled Ethereum if you really look at the landscape today, right? Like Ethereum focus on this like L2 scaling roadmap. I don't know. I want to say like 2, maybe 3 years ago when they pivoted away from the sharding roadmap. But even if you look today, like if you stare at rollup.wtf at any given moment, Ethereum's at best. Ethereum plus its L2s are at best doing maybe 260 300 TPS, that is still a whole order of magnitude less than Solana. And probably, like if you want to simplify it, maybe every cycle needs an order of magnitude more performant blockchain. Like by the time you hit next cycle, that's going to be 2 order of magnitude not performant enough to support the current level of activity, right? And I think that's conservative. If anything, it might be like every cycle sees 2 order of magnitudes more in terms of like user activity, people coming on chain, people doing stuff on chain. So entirely up to the L2s. I don't know if the L2s are doing enough today. Arbitrum, Optimism, they've just said, okay, whatever, fuck it. We're just going to keep our gas limit at 30 million forever, continue to use the EVM. Then you have Base on the other hand, which is like, okay, we're like fully committed to the EVM, fully committed to the Optimism superchain, but we are gonna scale the block size to a certain extent. They have this angle of 1 giga gas. I think they're probably around like 8x their block size from the initial 30 million gas per block, but I don't think it's still enough. Like if you look at the Base from like their sort of like lowest median fees at the end of last year to the median fees today, it's already 10x. Like your median fee is already like 0.01. For most people, is that like okay? Probably at scale, is it okay? I don't know, to be honest. And then you're seeing like a bunch of other chains come live with sort of blended execution environments, which is a good direction. But I think Eclipse very much operates at an ethos like, okay, we need to do it today. We're not gonna do some hand wavy roadmap saying like 1 year down the road, or like when you wait for our public mainnet, then we'll give you like the performance that you as a builder, as an app developer needs. We're just gonna do that today, And I think with like partially delivered on a promise, we've stress tested our network to some extent. And I do think like this SVM proliferation will continue. Like just because the EVM today is not meeting the demand of app builders and users.
Yeah, I mean, we're speaking about this a week ago. We had like the largest on-chain kind of experiment circus, whatever you want to call it, with the leader of the free world launching a fucking meme coin. And we were kind of talking about it on stream this week on Shitcoin Church and being like, where else would it have technically been feasible to actually get that thing into market? And we were kind of thinking back, well, Ethereum L1 certainly wasn't going to be the destination of choice. If you think about some of the kind of gas fee and the gas wars, kind of thinking back to the old NFT mints and things like that of prior cycles. And then we were really just trying to play out, well, where else would it have actually been feasible? And we kind of came to the conclusion Solana was obviously the destination of choice and like the right decision for that specific launch. But what do you think about that of being largest on-chain interaction across the board, probably in history? And how do you think that SVM held up handling that? I know there's a couple of front-end issues with a couple of the app providers and wallet providers and things like that, but how are you guys thinking about that and looking at that? And is there anything that you can kind of take from that, or is it more of just a weird moment in history?
I think Solana has had the benefit of having multiple stress tests at insane scale, right? Obviously, Trump was probably the largest stress test, but before that, it's had like a decent amount of stress tests too, right? You've had like numerous airdrop claims that just went absolutely crazy on Solana, Pudgy, for example, and like for example Jupiter. You've had you've had periods of meme coin trading that just went absolutely parabolic on Solana. At the infrastructure level, like the wallets, the RPCs, definitely. I think last Saturday and Sunday was a stress test, and there were probably like some issues that people were running into. But at its very core, the chain itself did not have any problems. All of the problems came from like the way people interact with the chain. You could say that's part of like the experience, I guess. You could say that's part of like the chain since you need a way to interact with the chain. But at its very core, Solana and like the SVM itself, the transaction like execution and processing components, they worked flawlessly. And I think that's just kind of testament to how performant the Solana Virtual Machine is. There's various features, parallel execution, local free markets, and like all of that would not have been possible on any chain, I think.
I mean,
And as far as like, sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, just because we initially started off with this direction, I want to kind of pose a question to both you guys as well as the audience who's listening, which is, as Ren said, every cycle there is 2 orders of magnitude additional performance demands. So Ethereum was here, and Solana is, maybe 2 orders of magnitude here. And in the future, there's going to be more and more and more and more performance demands. At the Pareto frontier, there is a inverse relationship between the ability of heterogeneous participants to run, globally ubiquitous full nodes and participate in consensus in a meaningful way in the network, and the performance of the network. As in, if you want to hyperscale performance in the Pareto frontier, where software optimizations have been fully exhausted, you have to do things that don't allow and hinder the ability for people to run full nodes and participate in the network. So Ethereum was here, and then Solana said, you know what, this is not a place in the graph that we want to be, and we want to be here. But where is the limit? Right? Like, does this converge fully to a single full node in a supercomputer in like some data center run by a company that ends up processing all of your transactions, for example, like Visa? Or where is the stable equilibrium? And maybe like this mentality is what like ends up. This mentality is where I've been thinking, like, if you take this to the extreme, you kind of get like a return to ETH mindset, which is that the beauty of the blockchain is actually the philosophy. Like, the product is the philosophy. It is not the fact that you can process transactions at X speed or you have a globally synchronous state. It's actually the philosophy is the core product. And I think Bitcoin is like a great embodiment of that. And I think Ethereum is like the iteration of that, where you have programmability and like innovation on the chain while having the embodiment of the philosophy. But like, I do wonder at what point in this trade-off curve we see a return to like, let's go back home, let's live in like the hut.
I think my head and heart say 2 different things. Like, the head says, well, if we do have systems like Ethereum and there is such demand for people to actually use them for the specific use cases built on top of it, then it's going to be pushed to the limits, and then it's going to force new systems to come online that appetite, like, fulfill people's appetite for the actual use cases, what they're used for. Hence Solana's adoption. People want to hyper speculate, they want to hyper gamble. Application developers want quick, fast, and they want access to users. So for Ethereum to exist, so Solana also has to exist, and they also have to exist in parallel, I think. And then I suppose it comes down to, at which point, from a user's perspective, do users actually really care about the UX? Is it 400 milliseconds like Solana, or is it maybe 1.2 seconds? Like, at which point does it really, really matter? But then it's like, okay, well, we've got to this point with throughput. We got this point with latency and kind of like transaction fidelity and stuff like that. But at what point does that give us a bottleneck with scaling? Because we've seen the other day, like, slowly started to become an issue. As I say, the chain never went down or anything, but then kind of bottlenecks started to appear on the network. Then you need that extra level of scaling. So I think if where we want to get to as an industry, and like where the tech needs to get to as an industry, I think you need to be optimizing for throughput and scalability and everything that comes along with that. But then Ethereum also needs to exist.
I mean, I think this is why, like, every time I think about the Solana marketing guys, as well as Kyle, and kind of this machine that they've created, I can't help but marvel at the genius, which is that these guys are hyper aware of the fact that you cannot have a single L1 scale global transaction demand. Like, they know this, they understand this. And yet, because the transaction demand of today and the UX of Ethereum is bad, I believe they've strategically counter-positioned against Ethereum this cycle as being somewhere that can scale global transaction demand. And ultimately, if you're an L2, and L2s are intensely necessary in the future, you're more likely to probably settle to the chain that, well, one, has fast settlement, but two, probably has more liquidity and stablecoin liquidity and RWAs and like interesting assets and interesting issued assets on the chain. And by and large, that has historically always been Ethereum. But Solana, like understanding that the end state and in the future that is a competitive advantage for Ethereum, I believe is what is now, like they're now executing almost a mindshare vampire attack using metrics that can only be used this cycle or maybe next cycle to then bring them to the position of where they can then pivot to saying we are competitive with Ethereum as a global settlement layer. Like that is my belief. And like to that, I ascribe genius because you talk to these Solana leaders and they're like, there's no way a global, like one L1 cannot scale to global transaction demand. We're going to have L2 someday in the future. And then yet in the public, this machine just turns about, Ethereum is slow. It's too expensive. It's unaffordable. And yeah, we've used this rhetoric sometimes as well. But I do truly believe it is about taking market share from ETH such that in the next cycle, when they do need L2s, they are then in a competitive position.
And I think that antithesis approach is 100% true, because you look at the huge push for like what came out of DevCon was like this 2030 plan for Beam Chain or whatever the fuck came from that thing, and that obviously threw everyone into a meltdown. And then Solana come out with increase bandwidth, reduce latency. So it's like you take such a convoluted roadmap approach. It's like, all right, well, how do we just position ourselves to be the complete antithesis of that? 4 words, and that's it. So even I think you're completely true in what you're saying. It's like we can just literally take the opposite stance of what's happening over there and say that's a solution for what's happening on Solana. So yeah, I agree with that. But it's the move that you've got to take, I think.
But I think the genius in that strategy lies in the fact that they actually like understand that you need L2s. It's not that they're like, oh, you know what, IBRL is like going to solve all our problems. They're very intensely aware that IBRL is the path dependent solution to winning. And in the meantime, right, if you get Ethereum, on the other hand, to focus on IBRL, then you checkmate. You know what I mean? Because it's like, we're like, oh, we know in the future that like being a global settlement layer, having the most stablecoin liquidity, having the most net new asset issuance, having that liquidity, and being a great place to build for businesses. And let me be clear here: for businesses to build L2s is going to be important, and that's in the future. But we can counterposition against these guys because they're kind of, price performance is bad. People are used to better UX. There's fragmentation, so there's growing pain. So we can counterposition against these guys by saying IBRL. But then, if in the process we get these guys to then pivot to IBRL, and they will never be able to compete with us in this dynamic, then these guys are fucked. And so it's like it's such a like a it's like a you're like strategically moving your rook and your bishop, so you're cornering the king and you're cornering the king and you're cornering the king. And like from my perspective, I'm like, I wonder how Ethereum is going to react to this. And I don't know if Ethereum reacted well to this, which is kind of like, Vitalik was explicitly like, we will not do a pivot to a Bronze Age mindset, and then he immediately pivots to a Bronze Age mindset. I really don't know.
You seen some of the core Ethereum kind of commentators start to come out following those seeds getting planted, being like, yeah, we need to optimize the L1 as well.
Yeah, and
so I don't know if they took the bait. I don't know if they took the bait on that or what, but yeah. Now you point that out, that makes a couple of the pieces are starting to fall into place for me.
But like my question to the listeners and you and Ethereum is like, what choice did they have? Like, could they have not taken the bait, or like did they fall for the Queen's Gambit? Basically, like, was there any better move? No, I like to just like lie there and think about this all the time. It's like, what would have been the best move for Ethereum to make in this situation? And frankly, I don't know. And maybe that's why Vitalik, invested and is very involved. Like, we're in touch with Vitalik. That's like a new development for us. But like, maybe that's why he's very involved now with these hyper performance L2 conversations. I'm not sure what they're thinking, but it's fascinating. The game is fascinating.
Yeah, of course it is. Yeah, it's amazing. All right, let's pivot a little bit. So last time we chatted, you guys were pushing DevNet. I believe it's the same day. What the hell's happened in between?
Yeah. First of all, I'll say, like, I do not think like Terry. Like, I feel like Terry just fucking lies on his bed and he's just like dreaming off about like a grand strategy game, and I'm just like, oh, what do I want for dinner, and like scrolling Instagram on my phone.
No, but I think about
But
these things because I feel like the people that execute on them do it with intention, right? It's like I don't want to ascribe false genius, being like, oh, it was a coincidence, but like it was intentional all the time. But I feel like in the text that I read from these specific people, I feel like I can decipher that there was that initial intention, and that's what I'm like. This is super interesting. But anyway, back to you, Ren.
If I had $1 billion position size like Kyle Samani did, I'd be writing with intent as well.
that guy works for his bags.
Yeah,
Well,
too, right.
I guess that's why
specific
Terry's chief
specifically,
strategy officer.
I think it comes from I forgot his name, but like the chief marketing officer at Solana. Or
Actually,
I think it comes from Akshay. Like
Austin?
I think it comes from Akshay and Austin. Like that's my belief. But who knows? Anyway.
okay, back to since we last spoke. When we last spoke, we were on developer mainnet slash mainnet for developers. We've launched public mainnet since 2 months ago. Just some sort of like key highlights of the ecosystem as a whole. We're almost at 200 million TVL. We have probably around like 600,000 active wallets. I'm not going to call them active users because I'm just going to get shit for that.
I wanna come back to that.
Okay,
But I'm
okay.
gonna put a pin in that.
Yeah, we probably have around 100 live apps and like service providers on the chain, and peak TPS of 8,600. But that peak TPS is like a snapshot. Over the course of like a day, sustained TPS wise, we're probably doing like 2,000 to 4,000 TPS on most days. These days, so ecosystem has been great. Obviously, with that have come some challenges. Like RPCs sometimes struggle to keep up. Our Discord has blown up probably from like 140,000 to I want to say like 330,000 today. So it's been interesting sort of like managing this new dynamic, because I think up until maybe like 1 month ago, to be honest, it was still very like tight knit core community. Everyone knew like what was happening, and then in the last one, it was just been like full chaos mode.
Chaos.
We have like apps launching left and right. You're helping them tracking issues. The community is like blown up. There's a lot of newcomers that have like no clue what's happening, what the vibe is meant to be. But that's kind of been like what's happening in the past 5 months since we last spoke. And going forward, the key focus for us is just to enable new, interesting, novel experiences. Make sure everyone is having fun, both on chain and off chain, and make sure people are just getting rewarded like appropriately, right? I think there's a lot of like cynicism in crypto right now, and I don't want any of that in Eclipse. I want people to have fun. I want people to be having a blast. I want people to be getting rewarded for whatever they're doing on chain again.
Yeah, so a couple of things. So the active users and the active wallets thing, you start to see networks lean into active addresses and trying to kind of like position it as a way that we've got this X amount of users, X amount of active addresses equal X amount of users. I don't necessarily like that, but I don't really know the solution to it. And I just think it's a completely different paradigm, kind of the pseudo-anonymous benefit of working on chain. How do you guys think about it? Because what I'm starting to see is a lot of apps not go towards like proof of humanity just yet, but they want some form of commitment, whether that be social sign in to claim airdrop or like just these little dynamics that we can kind of, no names mentioned. You definitely know what I'm talking about. But yeah, how do we really need to categorize it? Is there going to be a standardization metric? How do you think is best to actually manage that? Or is it just we're trying to get too granular about specific details that don't really matter that much?
As a ex research analyst, I hate active users, active addresses. My like ex colleague Dan Smith at Blockworks Research absolutely hates it, and he's been like the champion of this for like the past year. After working at Eclipse, they're definitely having sometimes where I'm like, like I should call them active users. It's in my benefit. It's a nice flashing metric. Long term, like it's not a sustainable metric in
Yeah.
any way or format. There's definitely certain like data things you can do to get past the noise a bit. You can analyze the wallet. You can see, for example, how much sustained on-chain activity they do are they interacting with apps every day? How many apps are they interacting with? So there's probably like some metric out there that's definitely better than active users, but it's also not perfect, right? Just because if you think about sort of power law dynamics, in the end state, most people are probably interacting with like 2 or 3 apps on chain. If you bring it to like the extreme, maybe just one. Um, and there's definitely like kind of benefits to just having multiple wallets, whether for security, spread out your risk, whatever, blah blah. I don't think the industry is gonna agree on a metric anytime soon. To be honest, everyone is just gonna continue using the metric and sort of like contorting it in their own benefit. From the perspective of a builder, I think I don't. I feel like most builders talked to like don't really ask about like active users. It's more about like raw on-chain activity,
Hmm.
TVL, economic activity, DEX activity. How like good is your ecosystem? How big is your community? At Eclipse, we have the benefit of like our turbo tap game that we have is gated both by Twitter and Discord. So there's like some civil proof mechanism, but it's also not like perfect, right? You could completely spin up like more Discords and Twitter. I think for us, the name of the game is twofold. First, show these builders that we have this level of economic activity, and like even if we have like a buttload of like wallets, that is translating to economic activity for the ecosystem, and that will translate to user activity for your application. And then the second component would be distribution, right? Just because everyone is waving these like hand wavy metrics, active users, active wallets, active addresses, but there's not a lot of chains that can claim like actual distribution at a massive scale, right? Like Pudgy Penguins is probably one of the, or like Abstract is probably one of the chains that can claim this through. We have X number of toys that are sold on like Walmart shelves every year. We have Y number of arcade machines out there in the world. We have Z number of people that follow like our Instagram and TikTok pages, right? I think long term, like that is the type of game that we want to play. We want to index for a future where crypto is adopted at a global scale and not just where like, hey, you're an app builder. We are gonna like perfect your app and build the best environment for existing on-chain users. I think that's thinking too small. We want to think larger and think like, hey, you're an app builder. We've built out this fantastic brand around Turbo that has X number of followers on social media. We have Y number of sort of apps that we know have real world users. There's social login, there's some social network features. And so we have a much higher degree of confidence that this is like actual users that are net new to crypto and not existing on-chain users. I think that's how we're thinking about this whole like active users and what it really means for a builder to like sort of like choose a chain based on that metric.
By the way, when you asked the question, I immediately knew that you had just claimed your Jupiter airdrop because I was thinking the same thing. I was like, how convenient is it that you get to tie all these addresses to your email account and now they have your email account and all the associated addresses? Like, boom, that is so convenient from a marketing perspective.
Won't catch me.
That's why I have 15 emails.
Yeah. So I seen the blog post about the Eclipse economy. I know you've kind of just skimmed across the top of a couple of those points that I ran, but I wanted to kind of like tap into each, I suppose, 3 points of Giga compute fee, revenue to apps, and this global relevant distribution. And if we can kind of expand on a couple of those points and why it's unique to Eclipse, like why those aspects and those pillars are unique to Eclipse, and then we can kind of pick the bones out of it. But yeah, I don't know where we want to start. Maybe like this idea of Giga compute.
All right, let's start with Giga compute. The idea is like we want to provide basically like 1000x Giga compute than what is available on chain today. And compute is kind of the gas unit of measurement on Solana. It's just our statement and our way of saying we want to be the fastest chain ever. And I think largely have L2s have replicated the L1 experience, except they tried to be 5x, 10x cheaper. I think it's time for the 1000x, a million x faster. I think we're 310 times cheaper. Like I think that's tough. It's like it's time to do this. Local fee markets. Oh no, should we talk a little bit about MEV redistribution, fee redistribution?
Yeah, let's go for it.
Like if you see a fragmented market where there's high margins, like your instinct should be, I'm going to lower my margins and try to consolidate. Like it's like the tried and true strategy that has worked, across millennia.
Bezos.
Right. So it's like
Your market is my opportunity here.
I'm sitting here and then, there's all these chains that have 100% margins, as in like all the priority they take it, the apps get nothing. And I'm thinking, what the heck? Like, and there's immense fragmentation, like immense fragmentation. And I look at my business school textbook from like, I didn't go to business school, by the way, but I look at my business school textbook and the first page, it says, if you see fragmentation and high margins, lower your margins and try to consolidate. And I'm like, okay, we should do that. And, and then people are like, wow, that's such a novel idea. Anyway, don't quite understand. But anyway, that's the point. Philosophically, it's also like, if you're an app builder and you created something interesting, like you should be making money, not the chain. Like
100%.
the chain should be making money insofar as it can support the dApps and it can support interesting dApps that are building on it. And, we've done a lot to kind of like push this idea into far as even going so far as like talking about things that don't necessarily like heavily benefit us. I think application specific sequencing is a great example here. It's like, if the dApp controls their own sequencing instead of the sequencer, then we lose out on priority fee. But I would rather live in an ecosystem and a world where dApp builders can make sustainable revenue and they can make sustainable, reliable, and high amounts of revenue, such that it encourages so much more, 2-3 orders of magnitude more dApp innovation, so that the chain itself flourishes on a volume business than it is on, the chain is going to take 100% of your fees. If there's an anime coin drop, it's going to cost me like $7 to swap on 1 inch. I don't think that's a sustainable business model. What was the last point?
I was just going to say that's a feast mindset as opposed to famine, and then it also, everything just ends up, you get a situation where some of these L2s and some of these networks that are taking 100% of the fees, the apps that actually go on to do well then just start to look at themselves like, why the fuck am I here? Like, I'm literally the only driving force for people to actually come to this chain. Then they either go and spin up app specific chain, or they go and look somewhere else where they're going to. People move where they tread best. Effectively, that's in live applications, anything. So we're coming to this crossroads now where I think 2025 is going to be a huge year for it, and I think you guys are in a really, really good prime position to kind of capture those apps that are doing really, really well, but they also want their fair cut.
Yeah, also let me be very clear, and any person who has built a dApp will immediately tell you this, which is like, in the absence of activity on the chain, MEV redistribution or fee redistribution means nothing. And that is so true. If you don't have the distribution, the liquidity, the asset class, the users that are actually on your chain doing activity, like giving back margin is really a marginal change. So I do want to be very clear that we are cognizant of this, right? Like it is in our primary objective to build distribution, to build a user base, to build activity, and it is in our then secondary objective to then give that back to users and dApps.
Yeah. So this aspect of relevant distribution, is this from a marketing comms positioning, like introductory standpoint, more like a BD and a marketing comms role, or like have I read that wrong? Like, I don't know. Who wants to like double click on that one?
I think for us, it's something that we fundamentally believe in, right? Sure, like it's gonna take us a lot of execution to make it happen, but we are putting the steps in place, right? Like just as Terry mentioned, your margin should be your opportunity. That's basically saying like, hey, we're gonna compete at scale, right? We're not gonna try to like sort of like limit and fundamentally constrain to anything, whether that's block space, resources, distribution. And so that same ideological perspective also applies to how we think about distribution. Because if you just look at the landscape today, breakout applications require like visibility, right? Like that's basically the thing like everyone begs for. If you talk to a lot of these app builders, it's basically like how much are you willing to show me, right? And there's only so much shitting that we can do. We definitely support all of our ecosystem projects like to a large extent. We talk about them from personals, we bring them on from AMAs, we talk about them from the foundation sort of like main corporate account. But still, like if you think about it, the addressable market today is still really, really small. And everyone is competing for the same set of like limited users. And not a lot of people are saying like, okay, crypto is building a lot of these interesting apps, some of which are probably novel and interesting to a normal human being out there too. The best example probably is just raw meme coin trading. But everyone's thinking of like, okay, how do I market this to just the on-chain crypto audience? No one's thinking about how do I market this to, I don't know, the 3 billion other people out there that are probably interested in meme coins if you tell them that you can 100x off it, right? So I think that's what we mean when we say globally relevant distribution, right? We want to combine this sort of like economic paradigm that Terry has talked about with the best distribution. And that comes in two forms. The first is us being very opinionated on sort of where we want to fight this battle, right? If you sort of dig a little, we already have Instagram accounts, we have TikTok accounts. It doesn't talk about Eclipse at all. It's purely for there to build the brand, build the distribution, and over the long term, we'll utilize that distribution for applications, right? The second component is helping applications do it. A lot of these applications that are building on Eclipse today may not be the perfect application for the existing on-chain crypto user, right? It's not some crazy looping in 5 protocols from 3 different airdrops at the same time. It's not you're gonna make 100x in 2 hours when Trump launches a meme coin. But it's probably something that a lot more people in the real world would use, right? For example, Stack'em. Stack'em is a game that just recently launched on Eclipse. It's basically like a stacking game. You click on a screen, these like boxes overlap, and it's really addicting. But we've introduced sort of like a financial element to it, right? You pay like a very small marginal fee to play the game, and then if you get a new high score, you win the entire prize pot. So I think people have won over $2,000 so far, and that's only with 300 people playing. But that is a game that like 10 million people would easily play while lying on their bed, right? And so we're thinking about, okay, A, how do we get that distribution for ourselves so that these app builders can utilize it? But B, also, how can we work directly with these app builders to get that kind of normie distribution? Is that helping them run targeted ad campaigns in a sustainable manner on Instagram? Is that helping them do sort of like the gaming guild play that we saw from last cycle with Axie Infinity that I think contributed greatly to Axie and Ronin getting 10 million users that they own today? And so that's what we mean by globally relevant distribution. Is this for everyone? Probably not. Is this a better axis to compete on as a chain than trying to compete purely for the existing on-chain users? We think so, especially for the long term.
100%. I'm so glad someone's actually talking about this because we speak to, like, some of our kind of like sponsored clients and things like that, and it's just like we try and position it as like, look, long form crypto native content, research, all that good stuff. That hits well with that crowd. You start going to YouTube and further afield, total different ballgame. It's like message sent there is not message sent there. It's like two totally different things. Know the audience, know what they're actually looking for. And then you obviously have to tailor the message accordingly to that. Like the idea of not really mentioning Eclipse as a network or anything kind of somewhat crypto related. It's like a Red Bull strategy. You go to Red Bull Instagram, no mention of Red Bull. It's all like the people that are associated with Red Bull. It's extreme sports. It's everything that Red Bull stands for. But you're not getting sold a product. So yeah, kudos. So not a lot of people are picking that out and running with that. So I think it's a great strategy.
Yeah, 100%.
Awesome. So one issue I have with when people are trying to grow ecosystems is you get a strong organic user base that are there for the right reasons, and then you also get a lot of people pretending to be there for the right reasons until or speculating around a specific token. Is it just part of the course? Is there anything you can kind of do to stop that, or is it just part and parcel of what's happening in the industry at the minute?
I think there's two main components, right? First of all, not gonna avoid the topic. Like airdrop farmers are obviously a thing, but also airdrop farmers like are the power users of crypto today. right? These are the people who are in the trenches looking for the next fun thing or next financial opportunity to play with. So it's not like you can entirely ignore them. If there was a chain that just said, I never wanted any single airdrop farmer, they probably would just never take off. You would never hit that threshold where you have enough like network effects, economic activity, and that flywheel to take off, right? I think Eclipse has had the benefit of building up our culture in a very like sort of tight knit manner. And I'm not gonna take any credit for this. Like all of this credit goes to Alucard, our head of community, who is probably the best like head of community I've seen in crypto. Everyone in the Eclipse community, I think, is very ideologically bought in, right? And obviously, I'm not gonna pretend like there's probably some subset of that is pretending to be ideologically bought in until like a potential token claim happens. But at least from my perspective, I want to say we're a bit more ideologically bought in than other ecosystems. But we've also had the benefit of not having to wait around for like a public mainnet for like 2 years. You know, we actually have something to show. You can only do like memes. You can only draw so much art. You can only have people hang out in the Discord for so long before having something for people to actually do. Long term, like there's 2 dimensions to this, right? People that are playing these games, people who use the app, like Apple doesn't think about community. Apple doesn't get people in a Discord server and try to entertain them on a daily basis, right? On that dimension, like I don't think community is as important. From a very crypto native dimension, community is probably the most important thing. I think every step along the way, we've made our fair share of mistakes. We've gotten our fair share of community pushback, but we've always sort of gone with like community first, right? We want to do them right, which I don't think happens that often these days. So organic culture is something that we're going to try to keep for as long as humanly possible. We are also relatively like aggressive in weeding out like non-organic artificial culture, right? Like if you're obviously here like to civil or to farm, like we'll just say like Eclipse is not the place for you. I'm happy to sacrifice some scale of economic activity if it does mean we have a much more tight knit community at the end of the day.
I guess some things to add before people and listeners are like, "Oh, look at these guys drinking their Kool-Aid," is that we're relatively small, and we started off relatively small. That's number one. Number two is exactly what Ren said: is we started off building the community when we had like something to do. There was public mainnet, there was developer mainnet, there were assets on chain. You could buy them, you could trade them, whatever. And so like there was something to actually engage with. And then finally, like we have, while we were small, there were a bunch of like native asset situated on chain that were then percolated, distributed among this core community, which then subsequently, because they perform well, you have this core small group of users who feel very connected to the chain as well. I think those three things like really worked out in our favor. I think some things we got lucky in, and some things, of course, like Alucard, our head of community, has been fantastic in.
Yeah. I'll add on something very quickly that like this might be like a bearish thing. Like 8 months ago, Eclipse was at peak sentiment due to events that I don't have to talk about again. But like we were not hype, we were not cool. No one cared about us compared to some of the other chains pre mainnet out there today. So fundamentally, as a user, there's probably zero reason to like be involved in Eclipse community. There's zero reason to care. But a lot of our core community members, if you just look at the Discord and maybe like our Kaido Mood leaderboard too, these are people that have been with us like since the very, very low point when there was literally zero reason to be there, right? And you could even argue like up until maybe like 2-3 months ago, there was still very little reason to like be in Eclipse, just given like there was nothing to do other than developer mainnet. So I think that's another reason why I'm like relatively confident that it's not an entire echo bubble and that we do have like a very tight knit community.
Yeah, you guys have done an incredible job of pulling that back from obviously the mishap. Like you truly, like from a marketing comms PR positioning perspective, it's been incredible to watch. Is there anything I might have missed? I know we're getting close to the top of the hour, and I wouldn't want to run over and take too much of your time? Is there anything you're desperate to get out there?
Yeah, actually, I want to talk about something completely unrelated to Eclipse. I want to talk about what should the EF do from here, right? Again, the wrong thing to do right now is probably is it IBRL, IRBL? I keep on forgetting. Whatever, whichever one it
Increase
is.
bandwidth, IP.
Right, IBRL. The right thing to probably do is further entrench yourself as the quote unquote settlement layer, which means having a lot of stablecoin liquidity, having as much external new asset issuance, and then probably having new interesting asset issuance that doesn't exist on other chains that you can uniquely position yourself because you are institutionally available and you are a rather chain with history and massive decentralization. So maybe that looks like partnerships with existing stablecoin issuers in many different countries just to get as much stablecoin activity and stablecoin TVL on Ethereum. And then maybe that looks like making sure like things like Ondo or things like new RWA issuance protocols or access protocols and then issuance protocols on both sides are both coming onto Ethereum.
Yeah, you're starting to see like Tether start to make waves. I'm pretty sure that their CEO probably about a year ago now, and I really don't know the plans of what this is, but he's basically saying Tether are now building product to be able to tokenize everything and bring it on chain. So I have no idea what that's going to look like, but yeah, I completely agree. Having like novel, unique products, assets, apps to actually create sticky user retention, all that kind of good stuff, I think it's drastically overlooked because what you start to see is you get new chains pop up and then they're just like, how much can we pay Aave or how much can we pay Curve to come deploy over here? And then you just get there and this is the same shit I've done everywhere else. It makes no sense to me.
Yeah, I guess a few last like things that I would just love to shout out is, first of all, we're hosting this thing called Eclipse Moo Games. Depending on when this podcast going out, it's basically this crazy on-chain like Squid Game competition. Users mint like a game pass to take place, and over a series of 4 days, they're gonna play 4 different video games, and there's a chance to win like a ridiculous prize pool. There's like one Celestian Sloth, there's gonna be one Mammoth, there's gonna be two Eclipse native like NFTs such as ASCs and validators. We're gonna be giving out extra grass as part of our turbo tab, and hopefully it's a ridiculous price for the mint is gonna be $50 each, and all of that money is gonna go into the prize pool. So if there are 100,000 players, this prize pool will be $5 million, and the first place winner is just gonna like retire, to be honest, and get like God knows how many NFTs, God knows how many like ecosystem benefits. So definitely like check that out. We're gonna be announcing all of the details next Monday, and I think that comes into my second point, right? I feel like crypto people don't have as much fun as they like. I want to bring that back to crypto while also giving users the opportunity to win money, right? Like this Moo game is a perfect encapsulation of that. You get to play video games over the course of 4 days. Assuming enough people play, you're just gonna walk off with millions of dollars. Like that is fundamentally, I think, one of the reasons why crypto does exist. And we want to bring that back to Eclipse, right? Stack'em is a perfect example of that. We have probably 20 more games like that, which are fun, addicting. You have the opportunity to win money that are coming online within the next month or so. I don't want you staring at Telegram chats. I don't want you scouring like contract addresses for the rest of your life, right? I feel like people should have a bit of fun while making money. And so we are going to bring that back to crypto. We are going to bring that to Eclipse. And I'm super excited about our ecosystem growth over the next months because like if you look at it from like a very crypto native perspective today, sure, like our ecosystem probably isn't the craziest. We have like the core primitives there. I don't think we've sufficiently found our own like unique edge that we can compete in. But I think over the next month, that edge will be very, very abundantly clear for everyone using on our chain. And so if you're curious about what that 1 million grass thing is that I mentioned just now, we do have sort of like an Eclipse game that's launched by Eclipse called Turbo Tap. You get to tap a cow. Every time you tap a cow, you get grass. but you also get grasped by bridging over assets. And there are a lot more exciting updates coming to TurboTab very soon. I'll let you speculate to what TurboTab is and what it eventually leads to. I'll give Grant some invite codes that he can pass out to the listeners of this. But yeah, it's time to cook for us. Like really, I think we know what our edge is. I think we know what we can compete on. I think we know how we can make crypto a fun, interesting, and opportunity, like filled with opportunity experience again for all of the users, both existing crypto users and like sort of net new users that don't know what crypto is today.
Sick. Terry, anything final you want to wrap up with, or
I mean,
I'm gonna grab some invite codes off Ren after this and drop them in Blockman's Discord. I'll leave a link below.
I think one great thing about working with this team is that there's so many amazing things that are going on that are all going towards the exact same direction, right? It's like, to be honest, like I did not know about this this initiative. I just found out. It sounds fantastic, and it's exactly aligned with
Setting up 100 wallets right now. Terry 1, Terry 2.
I regret claiming all the Jupiter airdrops under the same email address. Like that's going to screw me big time. No, but like we're all going toward the same direction, but everyone's executing on their own autonomously at extremely fast pace. Super bullish.
Awesome. Well, gents, thanks so much for your time. I'll leave any of the links below in the description. As I say, if Ren's kind enough to give us some invite codes, I'll drop them in the announcement channel and Blockmate's Discord. I'm sure there's going to be a lot happening over the next couple of months, so let me know when you're free. We'll run it back again. And yeah, thanks for your time. And if you're listening and you haven't subscribed, just do me a favor. Please just hit subscribe or like or just do whatever you want to do. Yeah, we'll see you next time. Cheers, gents. Over and out.
All right. Thank you, sir. This was fantastic.
Quick one, nothing here is financial advice. It's for entertainment and educational purposes only. Always do your own research or speak to a financial advisor before making any investment decisions.